Hello, everybody. With you from NFL Live, Tim Hasselbeck, Victor Cruz, Field Yates. I'm Wendy Nix. The Cowboys have a lot of mouths to feed, just sort of the way it worked out with the number of contracts coming due. Ezekiel Elliott doesn't necessarily have to have one, Field, but he'd certainly like a new deal. Where do we stand, and should the Cowboys pay him the big bucks?
I think the second question actually might lead you to where things stand here, Wendy. I think the Cowboys should not be motivated to make Ezekiel Elliott the priority amongst contract talks at this juncture. Dak Prescott is entering the final year of his contract. Amari Cooper entering the final year of his contract. Byron Jones also entering the final year of his contract. It's not that everything in the NFL has to be sequential, but when you have a roster that already has a bunch of highly priced veterans, who are worth it, by the way, you have to make some difficult decisions. And sometimes you have to make sure that you allocate the most important position before you just pay the player that might be the best player, because you can make the case for Zeke as the best. I think Dak Prescott has to be the number one priority right now because he plays quarterback.
Let's look in the short term in terms of on the field. That notwithstanding, how critical is Ezekiel Elliott to what this offense can do in 2019?
He's extremely critical. I always talk about it like if Dak Prescott's driving the train, Ezekiel Elliott's he's the engine that makes that train go, and Dak Prescott's the one that drives it. I feel like Ezekiel Elliott is the one that keeps them balanced, keeps them honest, keeps defenses honest, and his skill set is off the charts. What he can do with the ball in his hands, whether within the tackles, going in between the lines, or even on the perimeter catching the football, things he does in the screen game. He has a lot of different things that keep the Cowboys, ahead of the rest and offensively in that regard, that he is extremely important to that team. It's just a timing thing. It's a timing thing, not just for Ezekiel, but for that entire Cowboys organization. How do they keep that dynamic roster together, those key parts, Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, how do they keep that core together so that they're able to play at a high level for years to come?
Yeah, I think you could easily make the argument that Ezekiel Elliott is their best offensive player. I mean, and so in everything that comes along with that in terms of how he affects that team and their success being tied to how many times he touches the football. With that being said, it doesn't mean that he should get a deal right now because he wants one. If you think about it, picked up the fifth-year option. You also have the ability to franchise him. And so, then at that point, he would be about 26 years old, and then you could think about if you wanted to commit to him long-term. He has had some stuff off the field that has at least gotten the attention of the commissioner. And so I think when you look at Ezekiel Elliott and you think about, hey, are we going to commit to this guy long-term and give him a huge contract at that position when you've seen what's happened at that position with other players like Todd Gurley, who's also a fairly young player? I don't think that the Cowboys should be in any rush whatsoever to do that. You may have an unhappy player, but I don't really know the leverage that Ezekiel Elliott has at this point.
Well, and to that end, you referenced the names. You got Amari Cooper, you got Ezekiel Elliott, you got Dak Prescott. What's the strategy here to keep those guys happy, to pay them, and also continue to be competitive, because it takes all of this team, as you know?
Let's not forget what Stephen Jones said at one point earlier this offseason, which is that he made it clear publicly it might take everybody sacrificing a little amongst this key group of players that's looking for a new contract. And that began with DeMarcus Lawrence, who did a deal prior to the franchise tag deadline for 5 years and $105 million. But all these other guys might have to take, and we're not talking about a massive concession, but a slight concession to keep the core together, because ultimately the Cowboys have pretty much every requisite piece to be an excellent playoff contender in the NFC. The strategy, I think, has to be, can you continue to chip away and one by one get them done? I know that not every contract negotiation has to be the same, but the more that other players amongst this core, I don't say do things the right way, but do things without much contention, which is where we could be headed towards with Zeke Elliott, the more it makes you think that Zeke has to play by their rules to get a deal done.
Yeah, I just think it's funny for Stephen Jones to say something like that when he literally has had the biggest bargain in sports in terms of how they've played Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak Prescott has been the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, maybe the most valuable franchise in the National Football League.
Really, you could argue in all of sports.
In all of sports, and he's been paying their starting quarterback under $1 million a year. Right. I mean, so, if I were Dak Prescott and I hear that, I said, listen, that sounds great about keeping us all together. Yeah. But literally, you have had a free quarterback for the last few years. Like, it's time for if he earns it, which in my estimation, he has. It's time for Dak Prescott to get paid as much money as he can possibly get paid and not worried about how much is going to go to Amari Cooper or to Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, and keep in mind he was a 4th-round draft pick, so he's not in that first-round echelon where you have the 5th-year option. So this is his time now. The Cowboys, by the way, officially report to training camp on Friday.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports, highlights, and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.